Noah's Ark, Sodom and Gomorrah, the crossing site, the real Mount Sinai, and the Ark of the Covenant with Christ's blood on the mercy seat. Discoveries made the last 40 years by one man. Many shake their heads in disbelief. To some it even seems a bit silly. But what if there is a deeper meaning behind these specific discoveries? We can only know if we dive right into the Bible and look at the stories behind these discoveries. Is there a pattern that ties them all together? Do they all carry one and the same message? To many, these discoveries seems a little too incredible. But is God behind it, and what was it he wanted to say with it? As it rightly should, these discoveries have been used to prove the Bible stories were true and accurate. But in the Bible, we rarely see God removing all doubt concerning his existence and his messages. He even leaves room for doubt when his prophets presents the most important truths. Why? Well, we are going to look into it. These discoveries and the timing of them show another known side of God. They are all tied to the events around Christ's second coming. Jesus even used Sodom and Gomorrah and the flood story as an illustration of the time of Christ's second coming. That the remains from these exact stories come in these days are no accident. When Christ's second coming is described in Revelation 14, we see people being separated into two groups. Those who are judged and those who are saved. The story of Noah's Ark shows us the exact same thing, dividing the people into two groups. The majority is judged and sentenced, and a smaller group is saved in the ark. The one who are saved inherits the earth. The next discovery that was made was the Exodus route. On the plain right in front of the Red Sea, God divides everyone in two groups, the Egyptians on one side and Israel with a few converted Egyptians on the other. He separated them first with a pillar of fire. Then he opened the Red Sea and let his people cross safely, but the army of the Egyptians with their leader was drowned in the sea. One group was saved, the other was judged. The next discovery was the Ark of the Covenant with Christ's blood on the mercy seat. What do we see? The law is what judges, and the blood is what saves us. Judgment and salvation. It witnesses that those who believe in Christ taking their punishment are saved, while those who refuse are judged by the law. Ron then found Mount Sinai on the other side of the Red Sea. Mount Sinai was where the Ten Commandments was written down and where the Ark of the Covenant was made. It's also where God made a covenant with Israel. Here God's people were separated into two groups, those who received the light from the law and those who wanted to make their own laws. 3,000 was judged, the rest was saved. Ron Wyatt then found the remains of Sodom and Gomorrah. Again, the same story. God's judgment has come and only 3 people are saved. 2 groups, a little family saved, the rest judged and lost. But these stories contain another element that these discoveries play out. Noah built the ark for over 100 years. It was a visible illustration, a physical, visible illustration that judgment was coming. It was a warning for as long as it was being built, and people could, during this visible warning, turn their ways and be saved. But they mocked Noah and the physical evidence. Today, ironically, the remains of Noah's Ark are rejected and mocked. Yet they are still a testimony of the judgment to come according to Jesus himself. You might think, how can this boat be a physical evidence before man's eyes, right before 2 great destructions coming over the earth, and still disregarded both times? Well, history has a tendency of repeating. The Exodus route and the separating of the Egyptians and the Israelites. Yes, God asked the Egyptians to let them go voluntarily first. Pharaoh resisted and even mocked. God sent 10 plagues, a physical manifestation to all of Egypt, and for all these months that this lasted, Egypt had a chance to wake up, see with their own eyes the physical evidence of the judgment to come. Still, the majority did not listen. Nor did Pharaoh, and the final judgment came over them, while those few who listened were saved. Back to the Ark of the Covenant and the blood on the mercy seat, God's two testimonies. In the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments are called God's testimony. In the New Testament, Christ's blood is called God's testimony. The Ark is therefore God's Ark of testimony. A testimony, the word, is a physical witness or a physical evidence. It gives us two paths, salvation or judgment. If we receive Christ's blood, salvation. If we do not, we will be judged. The Bible, Revelation, shows us the tabernacle of the testimony opened and the judgment coming over the lawless on earth from there. With no mediator, having not accepted the mediator, they are judged for their sins. But are people mocking this physical warning? Mount Sinai, here God had just taught Israel about his power to save them. He taught them this through the Passover symbols, by saving them at the Red Sea, by feeding them in the wilderness and giving them water to drink. He showed them his salvation. He then instructed them and enlightened them about his law. They hear God's own voice. Both were accompanied by physical evidence, visual evidence. They had been instructed and enlightened. Now they were held accountable for what they were going to do with that light. Would they choose to let God lead them, to obey him and let him save them? Or would they rebel? Lastly, Sodom and Gomorrah. When the men in the city came up to Lot's house, what did they say? They said, "Who has made you judge?" Lot had been sitting in the gate where the judges in the city sat. Lot had instructed them of God's way for a long time, being himself a visible example. But not only that, many seem to forget in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah that God had saved them all first, a powerful demonstration of his power. The kings of the plain had all fought the Mesopotamian kings with all their might and lost. When Abraham, a known man of God, came with his few men, an unlikely number, he was still able to save all of them. The prisoners of Sodom were set free, families united. Abraham even gave them back all their valuables and riches. They were restored by the grace of God and by the hand of God's servant. Because of Lot's family relation, and they were saved because he had lived among them, Lot was a constant reminder that they owed a righteous man and his God all their freedom and prosperity. They had been given these visible examples that God saves and God judges. They had seen his salvation and they had heard about his judgment from Lot. Now they had decided, with full knowledge of the truth, to go against God in every evil way possible. They were judged, and Lot and his daughters were saved. The angels wanted to save even more people, and they let Lot bring with him more if he could persuade them, but they would not listen to their warning. So all these stories tell the same thing, and this principle is seen throughout the Bible. God always warns people of judgment beforehand and offers them salvation at the same time. Ezekiel made a physical miniature Jerusalem and sieged it to show people what was about to take place. He even pretended to escape the city to show what was going to happen. Jeremiah was asked to break a physical vase in front of the leaders in the city to warn them of what was about to take place. It was just one of several physical warnings he did in front of their eyes. At the same time, he told them of God's power to save and to restore their hearts to him. He was shown a potter working with pottery. When judgment came over Jerusalem, God had patiently demonstrated over and over again with words and physical demonstrations what was about to come. But people shook their heads. They refused to believe. All of Ron Wyatt's discoveries bear the same message and method as the ones God have given in the past before every major destruction. Would God not do the same right before Christ's second coming that he has always done before? A physical testimony of the separation that is about to come? Has God changed his ways and methods? Or is he the same today as he was yesterday? This is the thing with the Bible. From reading, we get to know God by observing how he does things and how he acts in different situations. And from this learning, we are to determine what is God's work and what isn't today. If we think God acts differently today than in the Bible, we have nothing to measure truth and error by than our own emotions and feelings. But if we think he and his message hasn't changed, then we can measure what we are presented with the Bible and there find if it's a fit or not. Ron's discoveries bear the exact same traits shown on how God deals with man in the Bible. 1. God forewarns what is coming and about his judgments. 2. He forewarns them with physical examples. 3. He instructs them in his laws and ways so they are enlightened enough to make a sane decision. And 4. He presents the earth with the option of salvation or the option of judgment. And again, he forewarns them with physical examples to get their attention. And what follows after these testimonies and physical manifestations? The parting of the two groups, one judged and another saved. All after how they choose themselves after the forewarning. There is no doubt in my mind that these discoveries are God's physical example and instruction of what is to come over the people on earth in the near future. Ron Wyatt was just a helper to bring people's mind to these living testimonies, but the evidence is from God himself. Noah's Ark and Sodom and Gomorrah are Christ's own examples of his second coming. You can choose today to let God instruct you, to take heed of his warning and make your life right with God. Or you can mock the testimonies, you can shake your head of these physical manifestations of God's power to save and judge and go on with your life. You are presented with the option of obedience or rebellion, of life or death, of judgment or salvation. God got your attention. You have been enlightened. You choose.